We usually walk through the world assuming reality is built like a set of matryoshka dolls. We intuitively treat the universe as a ladder of sizes, where massive objects are simply constructed out of smaller and smaller physical things. Standard physics reinforces this by training us to zoom in from a solid object, through its molecules, past the atoms, and eventually down to quarks. But theoretical work on the fabric of space suggests size is a relation inside a specific scale regime, rather than a foundational physical law. If we treat size as a secondary effect, our entire ladder metaphor for reality breaks down. There is no smallest physical object at the bottom. If we can't find a final, tiny building block at the bottom rung, we have to look at what replaces it. When we push past the limits of known particles, the fixed coordinates of space begin to flicker and drift. The crisp lines of geometry soften into a flow, much like ink diffusing in water, until the distinct points that define here or there can no longer be resolved. At this depth, the ability to measure length or width vanishes because the substrate has transitioned into a diffuse relational condition. We avoid calling this a field, as a field implies values stretched across an existing space. This is something prior, indeterminate participation potential. To understand our solid universe, we have to trace how these abstract, sizeless relationships negotiate with one another to build tangible reality. The challenge is mechanical. How does a shapeless possibility condition organize itself into three-dimensional space? It starts with the primary geometry of the causal grain field, the contact and void network. Contact represents physical constraint. It is the condition of local pieces pressing against each other and limiting mutual movement. Void is the exact opposite. Because of the way the contact pattern forms, it naturally leaves gaps. Void is the interstitial freedom, the channels, bottlenecks, and room for rearrangement. This creates a continuous cycle called turnover. Contact shapes the void. The void provides the pathways that permit turnover, and that turnover reshapes the contact. This dynamic loop is the engine that spins pure, shapeless possibility into stable 3D geometry. The result of this engine is a state between random chaos and a perfectly rigid crystal grid. Looking at a physical model of this packing regime, we see a semi-stable statistical structure. The pieces settle into a mixed pattern, specifically a Bernal-like 14-15 coordination. It is stable enough to support coherent structure, but fluid enough to allow for continuous change. Eventually, this geometric network reaches a state of macrostability. The network locks into a unified structure, forming what we call a frozen agreement. This is the moment scale is born. That entire web of microscopic relationships begins to act as a single, effective participant at the next level up. A grain at our scale exists because of the cooperation of primitives at the scale below. The hierarchy we see is built on this recursive action. If these foundational grains don't have a fixed physical size, we have to find a way to detect them. Scientists don't look for the individual grains, which are usually swallowed by the sheer scale of the universe. Instead, they hunt for persistent spatial deformations, the cyclic traffic jams and twisted bottlenecks in the void network. This diagram shows a laser interferometer, a probe sensitive enough to detect those tiny substrate differences. When a laser beam is split and recombined, microscopic traffic jams in the substrate appear as phase differences or path-dependent noise. We never see the microscopic grain directly. We look for the structural ripples that our coherent probes cannot average away. Our perception of a massive universe emerges from the way these levels of nested, relational packing stack together. Size is what recursion looks like from inside one layer. Mass, matter, and the vast cosmos are the observable results of this fractal hierarchy of frozen agreements.